Dear loving God, we thank you for the privilege of gathering together on this Sabbath morning to learn more about you and about ourselves. We pray that your Holy Spirit will be our guide and teacher. We thank you for your presence with us. We thank you for being with us all through the week and guiding our thoughts, our footsteps, our actions, and all that we've done. You've been there by our side. We pray that you would continue to speak to each one of us this morning, that you would comfort our hearts, and that you would strengthen us for the journey ahead. We thank you now, and we ask these things in the precious name of Jesus. Amen. So this is a book called Hunger Strike by Susie Orbach. Susie Orbach is a UK psychologist who is now in her 70s, I think, who's been working in the counselling for over 50 years, but specifically with women. She came out of the feminist movement, you could say, in the 60s, and was impacted quite heavily by that. I didn't know this. I read a counselling book by her, and I quite liked it. And I saw that she'd written a book called Fat is a Feminist Issue. And I thought, that's interesting. Let me get that. But when I went to the library, they didn't have it. So I got this, Hunger Strike, and it was about anorexia. And I thought, I don't know how you can write a whole book about anorexia, but let me have a look at this. And I wasn't totally interested in it from a personal perspective. It was more from a counselling perspective and helping women. And I started reading it, and she basically, half the book is in context of patriarchy. So what she does is she traces the upbringing of a woman, I guess, in a patriarchal society, and then shows the connection with women and food. And some of it was quite impacting for me, the book, but also I just thought there were some general principles in there that we could all glean from. And even if we're not a woman in functioning in a patriarchal society, we can understand how women function, or perhaps have empathy towards women in the society for this background, but also for their relationship to food. And obviously that's connected to what we look like, and that huge pressure of a woman having to look a certain way, the objectification of women, I guess. So for me, there was quite a bit in there, and I just thought we might be able to discuss it and see if we think it's relevant. I'm not saying we would necessarily agree with everything. I'm also not saying that everyone's got issue with food, women especially, but in my experience, a lot of people have got issue with food, and even men now as well. But I think that's perhaps from a separate angle, we could do that one. But so it's called Hunger Strike, and she relates that to the experience of anorexics who are basically rebelling against the system by refusing to eat. So that's the background of the title, Hunger Strike. So I'm just going to share some thoughts from her. And so I wanted to give a warning. Some people may find this presentation triggering and painful. And if that's the case, obviously take some time out, but also feel free to discuss it privately. And with me, I'm here for anyone who wants support with anything. And I just wanted to give that warning at the beginning. So I put two Spirit Prophecy quotes in as a kind of a background in the back of our minds as we go through anything that is a bit painful for us. So the first one is 1 Testimonies 486.3. And it says, in order to be fitted for translation, or part 144,000, the people of God must know themselves. Now, Ellen White talks about that in the context of knowing their physical frame, of what's good to eat, to have physical strength and mental strength. But I think we can apply that on every level. So we are recognizing the place in our society of counseling, psychology, medical science itself has, leaps and bounds in the fact of how much we do know about our physical frame as well as our mental frame, and the connection between the two. And I think this is quite fitting for our time period, that we are getting to know ourselves and God in perhaps a different way than previous generations because of all that knowledge. And then this is from Our High Calling 316.4. Our God, and I want us to remember this, our God is an ever-present help in every time of need. God is perfectly acquainted with the most secret thoughts of our heart, with all the intents and purposes of our souls. And I want us to think about that in a positive way. So when we make mistakes, God understands perhaps more than we do why we've made those mistakes, or why we've said what we've said or done what we've done. When we are in perplexity, even before we open to God our distress, they are making arrangements for our deliverance. Our sorrow is not unnoticed. They always know much better than we do just what is necessary for the good of their children, and they lead us as we would choose to be led if we could discern our own hearts and see our necessities and perils as God sees them. But finite beings seldom know themselves. I thought that's quite interesting. We don't know ourselves, and yet the first statement we read was we must know ourselves. They do not understand their own weakness. God knows them better than they know themselves and understands how to lead them. So in this context, I wanted us to try and understand our own weakness with the perspective of recognizing that God understands that and can give us grace and power to overcome these things when we know the root or the cause of it. And sometimes that's very painful, that we often don't know ourselves because it is painful and it's hard work to know ourselves. I think we said this at prayer meeting on Wednesday, and that it takes effort and commitment and and discipline to go through that pain of actually recognizing this is why I'm like I am, this is why I do what I do, and this is how I can change it, hopefully. If anyone's got any, I can't see the chat actually, if anyone's got any questions or comments, or please feel free to interrupt. So there's going to be some pictures. So she goes, this is on 2 slides, page 24, I think, of the book. So she starts to talk about patriarchy. And she says that for young women today, developing femininity successfully in a patriarchal society requires meeting 3 basic demands. The first of these is that she must defer to others or submit or yield to others. The second is that she must anticipate and meet the needs of others. And the third, that she must seek self-definition through connection with another. And I thought that was very interesting in terms of, what we think as Christians. A patriarchal society says that women should submit to men. And from day one, girls are taught to submit or yield to other people. And she gives an example of this in terms of parents, how they raise their children. So parents of a boy will say, go on, climb the tree. You can do it. Get up there. It's not difficult. And a girl, they say, be careful, get down, don't tear your dress, those kind of things. And so that very cautious, fearful mentality towards a girl affects how much a girl will explore the world, how much she will defer to her parents. Is it safe? Am I allowed to do this? What can I do? What can't I do? And obviously, patriarchal society, the woman is under the father of the house or the dad of the house, and then she only leaves the home in the past to marry a husband who then she's under that. Obviously, it was changing in the 1960s, 70s, this century, but she says that the impact of that on society was huge. And the fact that the mothers and the mother's relationship with the daughters, the mothers in the 60s and 70s were beginning to see that women were oppressed, and they had a rebellion against the system and perhaps resented being back in the home after the war. So they had to cook and clean and do the caregiver role. And that resentment, she says, also impacted the children, because we've seen a huge rise in anorexia in the last 50 years. And she relates it to that. But I don't think it's just anorexia, and I think it's important to understand that context. She also must anticipate and meet the needs of others. That's the role of the caregiver, traditional female being a caregiver. She must seek self-definition. So she is defined by her connection with other people. So she's her parent's child, or then she's her husband's child, basically, or husband's wife. The consequences of these requirements frequently mean that in denying themselves, women are unable to develop an authentic sense of their needs or a feeling of entitlement for their desires. Preoccupied with others' experience and unfamiliar with their own needs, women come to depend on the approval of those to whom they give. So she's talking basically about, and I chose that picture because I felt like we have to hide almost. We can't be who we are. She says this authentic sense of their needs or a feeling of entitlement for their desires. So you're not allowed to have desires outside of the traditional role. You're not allowed to want to be a lawyer or a bank manager or whatever it is. But it's more than that. It's expressing yourself in a way. You're only allowed to express yourself in certain ways, even though we know women are allowed to show emotion and men are not, in a sense, as boys and girls. But that authentic sense of their needs is crushed under this what they see a woman doing, which is meeting everyone else's needs and not their own. So they're a caregiver in the home. They're there to provide the food, primarily, because she's focused on food in the book. But the role of the mother is seen as, you've got to be a certain way. And obviously, as a woman, you've got to be a certain way. And you start to depend on the approval of others to whom you give. So you're there to serve. and you then want their approval. So you want your parents' approval. And some of that's not bad. It's not bad to want to do good to others, we could say, as Christians, but the way that the woman has been shaped through that is quite challenging. So then she goes to others for approval, and there's that dependence there. There's not that independence, which is more, cultivated in males.
So, Emma, did you choose that picture?
Yes.
So it looks like a Muslim woman with like a
It does.
hijab.
To an extent it does, but the glasses and the thing, to me, it was just an image of kind of hiding, that you're protected. You've got this head cover, you've got dark glasses, no one knows who you are. And it was just the fact that that goes with this idea that you're not even sure who you are because you've got to meet the needs of everyone else around you. And you're not even sure what you want because you're not really allowed to do certain things. So you have to fit the model. So it wasn't really meant to intend to look like a Muslim, but I mean, these are just standard pictures. Yeah. So she goes on in the same section to say the imperative of filiation, or the vital importance of being attached or connected, e.g. to a father or a husband. I've added that bit in just to give us some context. The cultural demand that a woman must define herself through association with another means that many aspects of self are underdeveloped, producing insecurity and a shaky sense of self. Under the competent carer who gives to the world lives a hungry, deprived, who is unsure and ashamed of her desires and wants. So there's something there about a girl not being able to develop because of that that association with another and being under other people and having to care for them and be there for others, and not even though. So there's this kind of contradiction, which I'll go on to talk about. But there's, in each one of us, there's an unsure, needy little girl who's been deprived and ashamed of her wants and desires. So I don't know if anyone disagrees, or even if men can relate to that as well. I'm not saying this is exclusively female, but because we're talking about culture and the way that people are raised in society. But we know there's a difference between women and men, the way they're raised. And I don't know if anyone can reflect back and relate to those feelings in hindsight or not. So
Elder Emma.
Yes.
Are we raising hands? Are we just talking? How is it working?
You could do either. I don't know. I can see if people write in the chat. I can see if your hand is raised, I think. So if you want to raise hands, or you can just talk if you want to.
Okay. So I wanted to say that I think I agree with that analysis. And I agree based on, I guess, observation, but also communication with women that are intimate in my life, like friends, my mother, my sisters, the testimonies they've told me, my partner. You really see the struggle that women have living in this world, living in society, and the deep social conditioning to want to constantly please others, and the feeling of guilt and perceiving selfishness for wanting to prioritize one's own needs and wants, desires. So I think I agree with that. I also just wanted to add something that I feel like it struck me today. I might have thought about it in the past, but not in the same way as today. When we study the nature of humanity, we, well, at least I would understand that we are not studying the nature of humanity as an end of itself. I mean, you can, and you can be benefited by it. So when you know more about human nature and how human beings are built and operate, there's benefit that comes with it. But there's a much greater end, which is understanding God's divinity. So the reason why we actually study so deeply and intimately as Adventists the nature of the human being is that we actually want to understand the nature of divinity, how divinity operates, and thus be able to fulfill our purpose in life as humans, which is to connect to the divine and, to to pursue whatever projects that the Human Divine Partnership was designed to fulfill. So I'm using that to make a point about women, like our study of patriarchy, women's experience in this world, that it can be an end in and of itself. We can learn something, we do learn something. It makes us more empathetic toward the women in our lives, and for those who are women, toward themselves. And it can help create a more equitable environment for women, because we get to learn, okay, a lot of things that are done are actually harmful. They hurt women and they don't like it, or it's not fair to them. We get that kind of understanding. But what I was saying got to me today was the fact that I think we study women's rights more than for women's rights themselves, but to actually understand something broader and bigger than the experience that women have. And I think what that is whether it's our culture as society or as humanity, and the broader experience of humanity. So when we understand what is wrong in our society with how it views and treats women, we can actually understand what is wrong in society with how it views and treats people in general. And that goes to the point you were mentioning about whether we as men or, can kind of relate. And I feel that I can relate as an individual. Not so much, not necessarily in the context of, uh, men and women, but in the context of religion. Much of my religious experience has been similar to that of women, where you are ashamed of what you want, and often there are certain needs that you don't meet because you are conditioned to look out for others and to think about others and not so much yourself. There's a shame that comes with it. So all the descriptions that we were reading, I could relate to. And I could associate it with my religious experience. And I'm not really like trying to criticize anyone. I'm just saying you can then see that this problem that impacts women actually impacts society in a much broader sense. And if we understand it, if we understand women's experience, what goes on with them, and what the solutions are, we end up finding solutions, I think, for not just women, but for everyone. I guess that's the point I wanted.
Yes, and it's a very interesting point, I think, that you're raising or making that connection between a woman's relationship to society or to men, and then our relationship to God as Christians. And I think that's all been impacted by patriarchy, because we have seen a patriarchal God and the way that so one of the things that I thought about this was that, we're insecure and shaky, and we have to rely on someone else, or at least be dependent on someone else, which means that women might find it easier to be Christians because they're raised to depend on someone else. They're raised to depend on the father or the husband. So when it comes to God now, we know all about that. It's very easy for us to submit and surrender to a God, although we can't see God. We've all got that issue, but it's a male God who we're used to submitting and surrendering to. Whereas the man, if he's been raised not to do that, now has to learn. I was thinking that's more challenging for the man. I think I've spoken to men about this in the past who've said the same, that they've got to now surrender to God and be in that submissive relationship to God when they're taught to be independent, provider, the leader on earth. And now they've got to surrender to God. And as you say, it seems like the same issues that we face as women now have been lumped or dumped on the men when they have to do that too, because now you've got to rely on God and think about other people, and it's in a patriarchal context that we do that. So our relationship is shaky, unsure with God, and there's a sense of insecurity because of that. need to meet the needs of others and not yourself. So I think that's kind of what you're saying, that you can relate to that as a Christian. And now as a woman, put it on top, when we come to the message of equality, we've now got to double deal with our relationship with God and our relationship with humanity. And this insecure, ashamed of our wants and desires, and now the need to speak out and step up. It's really challenging. I think it's been very challenging for a lot of women. And to take leadership roles, to take responsibility, when you've been raised all your life, to defer to someone else to see, is it okay to ask them what to do, to ask them how to do it. She goes on about that in a minute, so we'll jump ahead a bit. So this is the paradox as well in the situation. So there exists in all women to some degree two deeply internalized taboos which are socially reinforced in patriarchy. One is against the expression of dependency needs, and the other is the taboo against initiating. So what that means is that you're not allowed to express that you're dependent, that you want to, in some ways, be dependent on others. And this is the paradox. The paradox means like a contradiction, because you're taught to be dependent, to defer on other people, to ask the man how to do it, etc. But you're also taught not to express a need to have someone to lean on and rely upon, because you're the caregiver. So you've got that contradictory, everyone comes to the mother holds the home together. She has to care for the emotional needs of everyone else, but she's not allowed to look after her own in that sense. And the other is against initiating. So most people are keenly aware of how women's initiations are discouraged and frowned upon. A woman who is opinionated, determined, or directly lets her needs be known is frequently denigrated or grudgingly described as pushy and aggressive. Less recognized is how forcefully girls and women repress their needs for dependence and nurturance. So even though we're allowed to express emotion on one level, we're not allowed to express that need for dependence and nurturance. We need nurturing ourselves. We need to depend on someone. We want to depend on them emotionally. And we're not allowed to do that in a sense, because we are having to do that for everybody else. And obviously we've talked in the movement about women not being allowed to have a voice or speak out because they are seen as aggressive or hostile in society and pushy, and we're probably quite familiar with that. So there's this, I guess, paradox going on in a woman, that there's, on the one side, you're allowed to be emotional, but on the other side, you're not allowed to express your needs, your wants, your desires, if it doesn't fit with what society wants. So Natalie's put yes, yeah. And that creates this turbulent kind of relationships. The situation is complicated by the fact that simultaneous with the covert instruction to curtail one's needs are two seemingly paradoxical or contradictory injunctions. Firstly, girls are encouraged to display a range of dependent and deferential behavior. So this goes back to, you've got to defer to someone else, such as appearing not to know and requiring aid in such matters as changing a light bulb, in order to give life to the ideological dictum about men's superior strength and women's weakness. So we're constantly in society shown that women are supposed to go to men to ask for help, that men want to be asked for help, that they want to be the dominant ones, and that we're supposed to be the ones that don't know how to do things. So, you know, we have a blowout tire on the motorway and we've got to wait for a man to come and change it for us. Or the light bulb, she says, even a light bulb, you can't even do that by yourself, because you've got to defer to the man to know how to do it. And it reinforces that the ideological dictum or society's view that men are superior and women are weak. Secondly, they're guided to convert their own wish to be attended to into caring and responding to others. So the way they deal with the fact they want someone to look after them and help them is, I better care and respond to others. I better do what they want and make them happy. And that leads into abuse in a sense. And can do, and that's the extreme position. Of course, anorexia is an extreme position as well. Natalie's written, and unfortunately, men feel the need to be needed. Yeah, I think they feel that need to be needed because they're told, or they're raised to be the independent provider who the woman relies upon, and that's that structure of society which has damaged them too. So now they need to be needed, and that can lead into wanting to control and be needed. And if they're rejected in that, they can respond negatively to it. Obviously, all people can respond negatively to being rejected. I've seen your hand, Chris. I'll just finish the slide, shall I? In this way, women's true dependency needs are deeply buried and inevitably experienced with shame and distress. Their needs, thwarted and unmet, go underground. women do not feel good about themselves. Women constantly search to feel all right, and the approval of others temporarily quiets the uneasy feelings inside. So what that does is that their way of finding security or finding self-worth or self-definition is to get the approval of others, which helps them to cope. So if they can do something for someone and they feel the person's approved it, then they feel good about themselves. So in themselves, by themselves, they're not feeling good because they haven't got that response. And so that leads into the whole beauty thing, which is that the way women are valued or valued in society is by their looks. So they're valued by being attractive outwardly. Sorry, in the chat. Richard says, because we are so bad and need love. Yeah, men and women both need love. And this isn't in any way to deny that fact. Yeah. It's trying to show how we've been raised into these positions and how we're all damaged by those positions. But I guess this presentation focuses on the women, but I know the men are damaged as well. So this is not really to blame anyone, it's to blame the whole culture that we're in. It's to understand the whole culture so that we can understand how to fit into that now and deal with the issues that we're facing. So I think it helped me to understand a little bit my own journey, and I think that's why I did this. So let's summarize so far. Women in the context of patriarchy.
Emma,
Yes.
I got my hand up. I don't want you to move forward because I've got a question about what you
sorry,
just.
I'm not seeing the hands then. Go on.
I kind of forget because it's been up for a bit. I think I was going to say that it's quite complex. About parenting also is to fault in the sense that both male and female, but you were talking about male and female, but I know it's predominantly female here. If there's not proper mirroring with the child when they're young, then all these things can happen, whatever sex it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted to just say that in my role as a naturopath in the past and also as an advocate, anorexia or the not eating is a form of control. They feel they have control. And also it's normally to do with a controlling mother and demeaning mother. So I just wanted to say there's a lot as well to do, not just with patriarchy and external things. There's a lot going on with the parenting here. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. She's going to go on to talk about the role of the mother-daughter relationship, especially coming out, I think, because of her experience being the 60s and 70s and how women were now they weren't given equal rights in that sense, but they'd seen they've got some rights and now they're kind of put back in the home and resenting that fact that they're still the caregiver while the man goes out to work because they haven't moved forward enough for the woman to be able to go out to work.
Yeah. If you don't mirror a child, they will have low. Like we'll talk about women. If a parent doesn't mirror a child in their behaviours, then that child will have low self-esteem, lack of attachment, and then all the things that you said. They will go out looking for attachment. They will not speak up and so forth because they don't know who they are. And I know lack of mirroring is to do with narcissistic personality, but it's not the cause. But it can happen just with ordinary persons where if they're not mirrored by the parents, then all these things will raise. Thank
you. When you say if they're not mirrored by the parent, you mean if the parent doesn't set a second example for them to see like a mirror? I'm not quite sure.
Yes, when a child, if you look up mirroring, when a child does something or hurts themselves or does something good or smiles or, it's all about the mother being that mirror, like you said, looking glass in a positive way so they can find their self, who they are. They can only do that as a child by the mum showing them that. And that's why a child is always so focused intensely on the parent as a child. They always look to the child for reassurance because they need that mirroring, and that affects you big time in many ways, male or female, when you're an adult.
So Natalie, are you saying that the mother marrying the child?
You got me doing it now.
Mirroring, yeah.
Like
Mirroring
like
the
like a
child.
mirror. When you look into a mirror,
Yeah.
you
But
see
how
yourself.
does a mother mirror
Mirror.
the child?
It's,
Mirror the
it's
child.
Yeah, I just said a few things. It's quite an in-depth study, so you need to look into it, Google mirroring of parenting. But it's basically if a child does something and they're unsure of it, the mama will say, "Well done, that's good, you did this," or they
Oh, I
fall
see.
over. You fall over. Oh, don't worry, you've just taken. It's like when a child cries, you don't shout at the child. You tell the child why they're crying. So that it's like a paraphrase, and you make the child feel comfortable. You reassure them. You validate them. And all that mirroring has such a profound effect on
On the
children,
child.
especially female with the mothers as well. But I
Yeah.
think that a lot of parents don't do mirroring. They're more of telling you off than mirroring. Thank you.
I suppose it's more entering into their feelings and supporting them through the feeling as opposed to neglecting or rejecting that feeling. And I mean, there's a common example of when a boy comes who's fallen over, it's like, stop crying, grow up, you know, be a strong, brave boy. Where a girl falls over crying, you go, oh, it's all right, don't worry about it.
Damage right there.
Damage right there. But people both need supporting, saying it's okay to cry, you know, we're here for you. I'm sorry you fell over and hurt yourself, but now we can get up and move on together. It's that support, I suppose. And one of the things she brings out is about that mother-daughter relationship. It's because the mother is not always comfortable in her role as that caregiver. She can sometimes be very sympathetic and empathetic to the daughter, but sometimes she's saying, go away, daughter, grow up, do your own thing. Why do you need me still, especially in your teen years? When we see children as growing, we think that they're, or we just get irritable as a mother. Oh, this is what she says, a woman can get irritable that somebody needs them when they've got their own needs not met, and so then they just, I mean, all parents can straight.
Yeah, you're right. And also demeaning the child, especially daughter-mother relationship. I've seen that a lot when I've had patients with anorexia. It's always the mum demeaning them, they can do nothing right in the mother's eyes, all those things.
Yeah, and there's also that female jealousy, I think, which can even come in with the mother-daughter relationship. So the daughter's there blossoming and the mother's getting old, and it's that whole, all that. There's a lot of stuff I didn't put in, but I think it's it's very important, the whole relationship to parents. But the parents you see are damaged by the society too. So they've got patriarchal pressure to, the woman has to still look good, to be, you know, lots of things as a mother, as in her own personhood as well as being a mother. So it's so this mirroring conversation is definitely triggering. Blessing says, yeah, it's painful because you recognize that your needs haven't been met by those around you, and or they have been met badly, or you see the struggles in your own parents as they've sought to raise you, and then you try to seek to understand the damage that's been done to you. So in our behavior now, in our relationships with people, in our relationships to society, and specifically to food, it's huge, the impact of all those things on those relationships. So now we go back and think, how did I get to be like this? About how do I see men? How do I see my husband? How do I see food? Is quite impacting. So far, we've seen that patriarchy means girls are raised differently to boys. They're not taught to be independent, but to defer to others, and a shaky sense of self is a result. Her needs are pushed to the back to meet the needs of others, so she has an insecure position in the world to begin with. The author goes on to talk about the mother-daughter relationship, we've just been talking about that, and how the mother is insecure in herself and perhaps resentful of being in the home, and projects this onto her daughter and raises her daughter to fit into society and meet societal expectations. So we don't care what you want to do, you need to be a mother and raise children, is the kind of subconscious message. Usually mother is the caregiver and provider of food. Hugs, Natalie says, yeah, we need lots of hugs. This sets up a dynamic of training the daughter to do the same.
My hope was for blessing, sorry.
Oh, a hug for blessing. Okay, yeah, hugs. And it's important, hugs are important. And I think that damage to the mother, if she's unable to give herself to the child because she's got unmet needs, then, and some cultures are less huggy, or less, and some characters, personalities are less huggy. So if you don't, you know, we know that physical touch is one of the love languages. Well, I don't know if people know that study, but, and some people are now saying maybe it's not that correct, but there are needs in everyone to love, to be loved, and how you want to be loved is often how you've been raised to love and how you've been treated. And if you haven't been given many hugs and you don't feel that, you perhaps should be cut. You grow up not being very touchy, and not perhaps feeling very supported if physical touch is important for you more than others, and some people seem to need it more than others. But yeah, it's really damaging to some people the way they've been raised. Usually mother is the caregiver and provider of food. This sets up a dynamic of training the daughter to do the same. She must also provide food for the household. But because of the objectification of the female body, a woman comes to but because of the objectification of the female body, a woman comes to be valued through her body. And this sets up an interesting relationship to food. Lack of mirroring causes depression, anxiety, and much more when you grow up. Absolutely, yeah. And mirroring, I think, is probably the latest label, I guess.
I think OCD as well, because it's just the anxiety that I've had patients with OCD. When you track back the root cause, a lot of it is either a controlling mother, parents, lack of mirroring, and just the fear.
Yeah. So you haven't had a stable parental figure who's given you constant affection and attention, which is what we need to grow and flourish. And we know that that study was done years ago on babies' orphanages in Romania, where babies were neglected from getting love and attention, and they died. Even though they were getting their physical needs met, they never got picked up and hugged when they were crying, all those things. And they showed that the damaging effect of that on the human psychology. They've done it with monkeys too, haven't they, I think? But we know that if you're lacking in love and support and attention, the right kind of training and attention, you don't feel secure in the world, and you can, yeah, get damaged. So could you distinguish between you reading from the chat? Yeah. Okay, yeah, sorry. I'll say when that's in the chat. Please make a distinction between people commenting in the chat. So Natalie commented, lack of mirroring causes depression, anxiety, and much more when you grow up, in the chat. Perhaps we can keep speaking instead of using the chat.
Emma, your sound seems to be a bit muffled sometimes.
Is it? How's it for everybody else?
I know if it's yours.
I think it's yours.
Okay. No, it's fine.
Okay, maybe it's your CG. I'm not sure. Sorry about that. So this sets up an interesting dynamic between women and food. Women must hold back their desires for the cakes they bake for others. And satisfy themselves with a brine canned tuna salad with dietetic trimmings. Diet, deprive, deny is the message women receive. Or even more sinister, they must pretend that cottage cheese and melon is as pleasurable as a grilled cheese sandwich for lunch. I thought that was funny because I think I still prefer the cottage cheese and melon, but that's a personal thing. But the principle is that other people are enjoying perhaps more high fat foods, not even bad foods. I don't want to say bad foods, but high fat foods or high calorific foods, and women have to diet, deprive, and deny. For a woman, then, food is an object of an entirely different character. It is a potential enemy and a threat. A cardinal rule of femininity from young women in their teens through women in their 50s, we should be out the other side after that, but I don't think it's true. I think it's all your life, is that they should be desirable or sexy. Desirability is linked with an ever-diminishing body size, which is attainable by most women only through severe restrictions on their food intake. So this mentality of restricting food intake is, I don't know about other women on this chat, but for me, I started getting into dieting when I was at university, I think. So before that, I think I was fine at home. I was quite secure, I think. And when I went to university, I think I was quite stressed about relationships and, wanting a boyfriend, wanting to be sexy, wanting to be with everyone else who's got boyfriends and all those kind of stresses. I don't know whether it's that or not, but then I started this food issue with food. I remember I ate loads of cottage cheese, but anyway, so that then sets up this kind of like diet, deprive, deny message, which is, so when you approach food, as it said, it's a potential enemy and a threat. If I eat too much of that, I'm going to get fat, and fat is absolutely fearful because your cardinal rule as a woman is to be desirable and attractive, and that's on your body size. So she says desirability is linked with the smallest body size you can have. And then I put at the bottom of that slide, and you add conservative Christian views on diets and foods, and you can get in a deeper hole. because now restrictions are even required by God, and it's a salvational topic. So if you've already got an interesting dynamic with food before you become a Christian, and then when you become a Christian, now it becomes even more problematic, because it's not just that restriction is good. So it's easier now that you've got to be a vegan. So you can't eat certain things, you can't eat the meat and the higher fat foods perhaps, but because there's a safety in the rules and sticking to strict guidelines, or at least trying to, because nobody sticks to the rules all the time, and that's when you have all that guilt and that whole beat yourself up thing. But now it's salvational. So now it becomes an added pressure, stress, not just to be thin for society, but to have to have God's approval on what you're eating. And to me, I think that's actually quite damaging, more damaging. But having said that, with the journey now, I've spoken to a couple of people about this in the movement, how we've moved now from it being salvational, the diet question, which is good. It's just good advice. But at the same time, that meant the boundaries changed. It's almost like before we had some protection, because these are the rules, strict rules, which is what some of us need when it comes to food, or feel we need when it comes to food, because it's this enemy that we have to be protected from. And now the boundary's been taken away. It's not salvational. You can eat what you want, almost. I know you can't. I'm saying that that's how it felt. Now it's scary. It's like, whoa, now I have to have my own boundaries. And it's like almost like you're falling off a cliff. And I think a couple of people have related to that experience, that now I don't know how to navigate the food thing, when we thought perhaps for years that you've got this sorted out, because there were those boundaries there that God had put in place, and there's that fear to overstep the line in some way. Now that's been taken away. It's like, wow, there's a control element, as Natalie said. Now I'm in control myself. What choices am I going to make? Now it's like, ooh, this is quite scary, unrestrained almost.
Can I say my problem is trying to put on weight, and I think I always had that when it was just, I think when I came to this country, that I was able to put on weight for a while. Yeah, I did. But living in Zimbabwe, it just seemed like a problem, because I was always quite skinny.
Yeah. And did you always have enough food?
I think that was
because I remember you talking about that as well.
Especially after our parents divorced, it was like we didn't. I felt like we didn't have enough. I mean, my brother's friends were always around come dinner time, and which I resented, because we always shared our food, and we'd have not that much. So yeah, I think it was maybe thinking that there wasn't enough.
Right. And maybe there wasn't enough. That's why you were underweight, or you wanted to put on weight because you were deprived. So I think that's another important point. The book is written from a perspective of a white Western woman, maybe probably a Black Western woman as well, but she's Western. So the culture of our society, with the body image and the food and the excess of food and junk food now available, makes it, perhaps it's a different issue to being in a country where there is deprivation. So I think you've talked about growing up having an empty fridge, and that whole mentality of that and the scare of that and not being able to have enough food is obviously going to set you up to different issues. So I appreciate that, and people are coming from different cultures but I suppose patriarchy is common to all of us, and this still may impact people in a way now they've moved to the West in a different way than they had before, or maybe they had those opportunities in, say, Africa. They weren't deprived, so they had a similar dynamic. I don't know, but I think that's a good point. Thank you for raising it, because I think you've got so you've still got an interesting dynamic with food, because food is an essential to life. So if you don't get enough of it, and now it's kind of driven you down I want to put on weight because I'm not, I haven't got enough weight on me. That's perhaps a slightly different issue, but there's still perhaps an issue in a different way that's affected you psychologically. So it perhaps doesn't apply in the same way of this.
Sounding very muted.
It's what?
You sound very fuzzy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if it's your
it could, yeah.
sound.
But Manjit said it's not, so it's probably mine.
Yeah, you're quite clear this end.
Am I?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Okay, so this says eating like a bird is considered feminine and appropriate and almost sanctified. being able to withstand the temptation to indulge not only earns the admiration and envy of others, it increases one's own feelings of self-esteem. One has resisted where Eve didn't. One has refused the apple. She's using that as a parable. I don't think she's a Christian, but she's just saying, everybody knows the story of Eve and Adam and Eve eating the fruit, and she's saying there's some superiority in resisting this fruit, eating too much, basically. And it's interesting, she said it earns the admiration and the envy of others. So I think there is a lot of envy amongst women and admiration, but there's a mixture because of this whole need to be thin. And you're looking at women in a different way. Are you thin? Are you fat? Are you pretty? Are you attractive or not? And you're comparing and contrasting constantly with your own body image. And I don't think men look at people or other men like that. I don't think they see food like that. I don't know. This is what she kind of puts across. This is a woman thing. But just as surely as denial is enviable, so its opposite, indulgence, is understandable, comprehensible to all. To fall off the ladder of denial is to enter into cozy communication with others who have suffered similarly. And conversation turns to dieting, e.g. the dessert menu. Will I be able to resist? Maybe I can have it just this once. Won't someone share it with me? Like, I take responsibility for eating this with me so I don't have to bear all of it. Since women must not eat, they know not how to eat or what they wish to eat. They live in the shadow of Eve. They have all sinned. So I don't know if women here can relate to that experience, but I certainly can relate to that. Blessing, you had your hand up.
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say is that I would appreciate, like, I'm not forcing any woman to speak, but I would actually appreciate their thoughts on what was just said, just to have a closer testimony on what you said, on what you read.
Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to say is there's a book that I've been reading. I'm not quite recommending it because the author she's a feminist, but yeah, some of her methods and some of the things she said can be problematic. They're questionable. Her name is Naomi Wolf. She wrote a book, probably many books, but the one I'm talking about is called The Beauty Myth. And in The Beauty Myth, she talks about this issue of diet and the need for women to subscribe to a stereotypical template for how they should appear, and how this is actually it's an economic thing, which I think is correct. That really it's not so much about individual men and what individual men want from their female friends or from their partners, but it's about an economic model that profits off of the insecurities of women. And one of the things she said toward the end of her book, which I thought was quite interesting, was that men also have a stake in this issue, and it's important for them to be interested in it and participate in it because basically they're next. So she was saying, as much as it's in a far smaller degree at the moment, but marketers, for example, have begun to see the economic benefits of targeting men the same way that women have been targeted, in terms of having a myth around their appearance, what the ideal appearance is. And as a result, men have begun to be a lot more insecure about how they look. And they've basically begun trying to watch their weight and what they eat in a way that's similar to that of women. But of course, she wasn't saying it's like to the same degree, it's more, because it's not. But the point that I wanted to raise is it's important and good for us to actually address the problems that women face, because it will affect everyone eventually, as evidenced by this shift in society. I mean, in the past society, yes, like Greek societies, and yeah, particularly Greek society, they idolized the youth of boys, but it still had a feminine quality to it, the way they did it. But now you can also see a lot of the principles that have been applied to women beginning to be applied to men, and it's economically motivated. Like it's really about making money. But in the pursuit of wealth and money, these corporations, industries, etc., these institutions, they end up causing real world damage to individual people. So yeah, that's just the point I wanted to make, that we secure women's freedom, we secure everyone's freedom. We ignore women's experience and the bondage that they are under. Then eventually all of us will be under bondage.
Yeah, and that's something certainly I think we've spoken about in the movement, saying that the least person, how they're treated, affects everyone. And that if people, and society even says that if some people haven't got equal rights, then none of us have. And people see that and they fight for everyone. And I think it's a good point that it's affecting men as well. And I see that working with teenagers, that men are now very much, I mean, they've always perhaps been into bodybuilding and getting the strong muscles, but the manscaping with cutting your hair and having to have clean shaven legs and body parts, private body parts, it's just getting very like the pressure on women, as you say, to look good and to be attractive, and what's attractive and what isn't attractive. When I talk to teenage boys, it's very similar, that whole pressure to look good for the opposite sex, primarily perhaps, but even that insecurity in themselves, that if I had a sharper jawline, I'd be more attractive, even down to that. And they're saying things like, if you chew a lot of this certain type of gum, you'll get a different jawline. I mean, it's getting very stressful for the men as well. I hope people don't mind if I read out the chat. I didn't realize, I think perhaps we should limit the chat because we can say these comments out loud. I'm not following. Let's see. So Natalie says she's never dieted herself. They don't work, do they? Blessing says, I think it's toxic. Yes. This goes on to say, this goes to Blessing's point earlier and how everyone can fall into this with regards to their relationship with God. Those boundaries or health laws just being the equivalent of the patriarchal boundaries women face. Natalie says, I don't think you can compare God health laws for men to patriarchy for women. It says that's not the point. The point was the relationship between how we think about choices. Yeah. Natalie says you can't compare the depths. Sorry. I don't know if you want this. So you don't think viewing God as a patriarchal God is the same as seeing culture as patriarchal, as parabolic? Yeah, I think there is some comparisons to be made, because the way we behave in Christianity is so patriarchal, and the way we've seen the laws is from a patriarchal mindset of control and the need to follow. If you step out of line, you're lost or not valuable. It's a similar concept. Natalie comments on the parenting. Lack of parenting and narcissistic abuse creates indecisiveness, so boundaries aren't cultivated within. So when you say God's rules are taken away in regards to dieting the movement, those who are not used to making up their own minds will suffer much. And I think yes, I think that's true. I think also we've trusted in the rules and the laws for our salvation. So there's that added element of, if we do this, we'll be saved. And now we don't have to do it. How do we be saved? And where's our security in knowing we're saved, even though we didn't really have security before, because even though we knew we had to do the rules, we didn't always do the rules. So then we felt bad about it. So there's this kind of interesting relationship to law, I think. And it's similar to the relationship to what society says are law. And then Curtis shares about a male experience. I think I don't mean to detract from the fact this is focused on the experience of women in society, as it's definitely something that's systemic in that regard, but on how weight and size has been the bane of his life. It's never been good enough. When I went vegan, I lost weight and it was, oh, you're so skinny. And when I gained weight, it was, you're getting fat. And true, and it's what we were just saying about it being on men as well. And now as men's bodies are being policed in a way they perhaps haven't in the past, it's exhausting to aspire to look like Chris Hemsworth all the time, muscular and trim and not fat. I don't know who that is, but I get the picture, whether it by comments from family, friends, or romantic interests. And I think that's true because we're all being shaped by the society. So what we see as beautiful is really shaped by what the media is showing us and putting pressure on us to do. Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. And I agree, you can't win. You're sort of like, you're too thin, you're too fat. Well, you just want to step out of that and just do your thing. Wasn't necessarily commenting about the good or bad of what the diet, but humanity's relationship with expectation, how it affects our minds. What good or bad of what the diet is, but humanity's relationship with expectation. Yeah. So we have expectations and they're not always met in many ways. And many times the expectations are false because of the way that we've been raised or cultivated, educated to believe. And so this is what we need to do to see how to change our mindset towards things if it's damaging us and other people. So I see two hands. Natalie.
I just wanted to go back to something you said about the you said something about struggling. Now you have to make up your own choice how you eat, what you eat was really hard. And I think I want to mention that with patriarchy, a lot of women were still very settled in the men making the decisions for them because it was easier. It was I'm not saying women are lazy, but it was just so thingied in their brain. The men just let the men do everything. That when the boundaries were taken away, where you can take it as good advice, a lot, like you said, you struggled with making the decision because you were used to God giving you the rules. Whereas the same with the men, the husbands, the domineering parents, narcissistic parents, whatever you want to say. So my point in that was that if you haven't got a mind of your own, if you haven't got great parenting skills given to you as a child, not parenting skills, if the parent hasn't got the skills, then when it comes to setting boundaries, making your own decision, having your own self-esteem, just won't be there, which is quite damaging for a lot of people. And we can see that, as you say, with the diet situation or the salvation thing, it's all left because you become very indecisive. You don't know your own mind when you've either had a parent who's not mirrored to you or you've been abused. Thanks.
I think as well, if your parents weren't very decisive, it depends, even if it wasn't abuse, if they weren't that great at helping you, guide you to make decisions, just saying, oh, do what you want. Or that as well, even though that's good in some ways, it's like, because of what we've just been reading, it's quite hard to do that. And I think what you said too about families and boundaries is good stuff, and it applies to the movement too. So that's the same, I think we're going through with the angels discussion. It's a similar principle that we've been used to having a man primarily, then Elder Tess, even though Elder Tess wasn't a man, the patriarchal system said the leader makes the decision and you just go with what the leader says regardless. And so for me personally, working in the organization, the movement is been challenging because I just want to defer and say, tell me what to do. What's the answer? And it will constantly come back, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to take responsibility for this. I don't want to make a decision about someone's life and what they're going to do going forward. And you recognize the challenge of that, of having to make those decisions. But we've been geared in the movement to say the leader makes those decisions, or the leader makes decisions about doctrine, and we just defer. And I think now it's a bit shaky for people because we're going, well, who's going to tell us the right answer when we've been so used to someone telling us? And I think that's why we're struggling with that. I'm going to say there are no angels. What's going on? Curtis, you got your hand up.
I just wanted to comment on the discussion I was having with Natalie in the chat, perhaps clarify what I was pointing out, which is that you can have a parent do the right thing, as in it's the right thing, but do it in a wrong way. That's still patriarchal. So you can have a parent say, eat your fruits and vegetables, and that's the right diet, eat a whole food, fruits and vegetable diet, but approach it in a way that damages the child. So I've heard many testimonies by people in the movement who've expressed that they just have a bad relationship with fruits and vegetables now because of how it affected their lives as children. Not because the diet was bad, but because of how just it went about in the family dynamic. And so when we consider this topic, what I brought up, that you can tie the link between God, health laws, humans, to women and patriarchy and etc. It's maybe Natalie didn't see what I was trying to relay in that connection, but you can still have something good and approached in a negative way where it's instruction and not education. So the better would be the parent educates the child to see the love and joy of fruits and vegetables and blah 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 blah. Anyway, that's the connection that I was making in the chat. I don't know if she still doesn't see it that way.
I thought she was conceding by the end of that it was, I could see that. I'm not sure. I'm sure what's to comment further. I'd like to hear, I know Blessing said this about hearing from the women. I don't know if those that haven't spoken, I don't know if Rose or Shami or Susan or Debbie can give their experience of anything, or Melania. Anybody want to share what up to now, what we've said, if they can relate to any of that, if it's not their experience? Debbie, have you got
It's not my experience. Sorry.
which bit? That's
That,
quite a few things.
the slide you've got up now, the fear, the eating, the fear of, what was it you said, Emma? You said it before and then we went on to another subject, but now we're coming back to it and you're asking us to comment. I think if it's this slide, I think.
Oh, they're talking about dieting and not being able to resist food, and since women
Yeah,
are not eating.
Yeah, I don't have that issue, but I'm only saying that because I know I'm probably one of the ones who, I think there's more probably people suffering with it than there is like me. So I'm probably, maybe I'm not assuming, but I know a lot of women like my sister and others that have this problem that you've mentioned, but not me, sorry.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if there's perhaps other angles to it. I don't know that this, not this specific thing, but if they can relate even to the women being raised in patriarchy, that whole feeling of insecurity, not being able to make decisions or deferring to other people, maybe not just the food issue. But Debbie, I don't know if you've got any comments, do you?
No, I don't think I have issues with food. Only lately, because before I was able to eat anything and just burn it off because I was very sporty, and I think that as I've gotten older, the weight has come on. So I am trying to lose weight, but it doesn't affect me in a way where I've got those problems, psychological problems with food. I don't have that problem.
I suppose we have other pressures getting older, like, the way we look. I think that's still part of a.
Yeah, I think that's true. I know I have. I won't go into that, but I think you do. I mean, you don't think you do, but you do.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that's come from really, but you do have it when you're getting older, definitely.
And I think a huge part of that is what we were saying earlier about the patriarchy and how it raises women to be valued or sexy or desirable by their looks. And if you lose the looks, which includes going grey, getting wrinkled, getting fat.
Yeah, I think I definitely have that problem.
Then you're not.
I think I've got
valuable.
that. Yeah, I have. Yeah.
So
I think it was when I started going, late 50s and into 60s. That's where it really bothered me. It never bothered me before, but I think it does bother me, and I don't know what the underlying question is behind that, or the reason behind it. I don't know, but I should imagine I'm not the only one who goes through that.
I think it is because of society, the rejection, even though we think we're doing it for ourselves, that part of us wants to fit in and everyone else around us is doing things to stop aging, for instance. And society is ageist. So being a woman, on top of losing your looks, you're cast aside when you're an old woman because you're not valuable anymore. So you're not even valued in your opinion, like men are, because of the whole patriarchy. So there's that pressure to be accepted. And
I never thought about that bit. I think I just it's that I deal with. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. And then she says in the book, that we have to be desirable at least in our 50s, but I still think beyond that we have to be desirable. It doesn't stop just because you're 50s. I'm thinking, phew, it should stop soon then. What about Rose? Rose, do you have any thoughts?
Melania's put something in the chat.
Oh, Melania, sorry, I can't see the chat.
Hi, Emma. I really wanted to contribute a lot, but I'm actually traveling, and that's why I'm a bit silent, awkwardly silent, right? Because there's a lot of background noise and
straight for 9 minutes to 846 towards the south.
Don't worry. We can talk some more after. Melania says, it's been my experience, it's a painful one. Absolutely, Melania. sending you hugs. It's very damaging. And when you start reading about it and learning more about it, you think, wow, that really reflects some of my experience. And Richard says, I've aged much this last few years. Yeah. And I think age is another challenge that we're all facing. It's not just a mental one, it's a physical one. That physical pain, aches and pains and sickness, but it's also the body breaks down, but the mind and the approach to it and the fact that life is coming to an end. And yet there's a lot of that psychology too. Brian, you've got your hand up. Oh, did he disappear?
You're on mute.
Oh, he disappeared because okay.
Sorry, yeah. I joined a bit late, so I'm not really up to scratch with the direction you're going. But from what I've heard so far, I don't think this is really limited to women. Men definitely suffer that. They may not show it, but they definitely, I can tell you. But I'm one of those as well who really couldn't be too bothered because of overweight and aging. I just know it's a part of a process that the human body goes through. And as far as gaining weight, look, I've tried many times to lose weight. I do lose weight. I pick it up again. Then it's hereditary as far as I'm concerned, because I look at my family. We all seem to be that way. And I just accept things as they are. And I don't get too down about it. And as far as aging is concerned, yes, sometimes it gets to you. I'm actually surprised that I'm at the age I am. I don't even feel it, but I am that way. And as I'm aging, it seems to getting faster. Your body starts, you can feel that you're not as you were a year ago.
Mhm.
And I really don't mind, honestly. I just take it as it comes.
It's an excuse to
So
sit
yeah,
longer in the chair.
sorry.
It's an excuse to sit down and have self-care and sit longer in the chair and relax.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I'm looking forward actually to retiring and
Yeah.
sitting in the chair. I
Yeah.
really am.
Oh, thank you for that. I know, and aging is another problem onto the looks. I think what you said about accepting is a huge part of everything. And I think the first step to all of us really is accepting our bodies for what they are, accepting what we're going through, and not trying to fight the process in the sense of not saying you shouldn't do what you can to stop it. Like you said, I've dieted and it's worked sometimes, or I've done exercise and I feel better, whatever. Because it takes discipline and hard work, and you feel it more as you get older to do these exercises and stuff. But accepting who you are from, especially from this body point of view, of that you haven't got the perfect body, whatever that looks like, that to be happy in the body, which is what she's going to talk about. I know Charity's asked in the chat.
I was going to say, Emma, it makes me laugh when people say, "Oh, you look good for your age." So there's sexism there straight away, and ageism.
Yes, yes.
Especially when you're over 50, or you look good for your age. You're like, well, that's sexist and ageism right there.
Absolutely, but don't we say that? Haven't we all said that to people, or haven't we thought it? Or I guess
we shouldn't now.
We shouldn't now. No, we shouldn't be really commenting on how people look, whether it matters or not. Didn't I look good, but not for my age? Don't I look good anyway? Yeah, it's very emotional. So Charity says, what experience are we speaking about? She missed something. So I was just generally, I guess, onto the presentation so far. The background is it's dealing with anorexia specifically, or food issues in the context of patriarchy. So we read some things about patriarchal society, how it affects the raising of women, how we get damaged by that, having to defer to someone else and submit to someone else. And so we lose our sense of self and who we are and what we want. We're not able to express that perhaps. So that then gets buried, and that comes out in multiple issues. So one of them, obviously the book's focused on anorexia, is this relationship with women and food, which an anorexic is an extreme version of. But in reading some of the things, I was triggered because I thought, wow, I'm not anorexic and I've never been anorexic, but I've had issues with food. And I think the same issues that she's dealing with here are my experience. And so I'm saying, wow, I could have been anorexic, but I wasn't. I would say I was more the other way. If anything, I was more bulimic. And she does touch on that as well. And I've started the book, Fat is a Feminist Issue, and it's probably just going to deal with the other side of it, which is putting on weight as a rebellion to say, I'm just going to comfort eat the food, to null the emotions, because there's a huge emotional attachment to food, especially with women. And I think men don't have that same approach to food, and they don't have that same approach going what Brian was saying about being fat either. So it's not saying that they like being fat as they get older, but there's an acceptance in society that men have hot bellies and it's okay, that men are not rejected because they have a fat belly, and women are treated differently because of it, and they see it differently in their own head. So a woman might battle with her weight and constantly be on this diet cycle thing. And I know Brian says he's dieted, but he doesn't see it the same way, and he doesn't feel the same way about it as a woman does, because he's not rejected primarily by what he looks like. She makes the point in the book that men are more viewed and looked upon as the provider. So when they can't provide, that's how they're valued in society, for their provision. So when they can't work anymore, they get disabled, or they get old, or it gets difficult, or they lose a job and they don't have a job, that's when men really get insecure. And so they have a different relationship. Their value or their worth in society is judged by their job as opposed to their looks. And to me, it's easier because you can change your job, you can kind of step back from it and say it's someone else's fault. But when it's your looks, it's very intimately connected with who you are. It seems more difficult for me than it does.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, with this writer as well, Emma, she used to be a therapist to Lady Diana, you know. She was a therapist to Lady Diana because she was suffering from anorexia. That's what made me think of it when you said anorexia.
Yes,
yeah, she used to be a therapist to Lady Diana. And regards to men, when you said about them putting on weight, if I think about younger women, do younger women find overweight men attractive? I don't think they do.
No,
when you said it was all right for them to put on weight, I don't honestly feel that younger women in the 20s and up to 30s find overweight men attractive. They wouldn't go for an overweight man.
Not younger men and women, no.
No, exactly. So I do think there is a stigma there on men as well.
There is. And as Curtis and Blessing, I think, we're pointing out that this is becoming much more of a man thing now as well, because of social media and the way that, because women have been treated that way, men are now getting treated that way in the sense of the looks, the pressure to look a certain way is getting much more refined and defined. You know, they've got to have no hair, they've got to have muscles, they've got to have a jawline, all these things coming in now for the
That's
men.
Western though culture, isn't it? In some cultures, to have a big belly is a sign of being wealthy and being, you know, okay, basically.
That's true. And of course, in different times in history, so the Renaissance, when you see all these women with big busts and big chests and big bottoms, that in the 1700s, it was looked on as for a woman to be round and fat was actually very attractive. And now it's gone the other way. So it's stick-like thin. And it's been that way for a while, I think. I think we're trying to push against it, but it's still difficult. So it is very much fashionable in culture as well. So just to Debbie's point about the men, I think more as they get older, it's more accepted for men to put on the weight. It's not so it's still accepted for the women to do that. And that's not to say that a woman who's getting older finds her husband attractive with lots of weight on. They never married them like that, and it's not the best. Or the other way around, if a woman puts on a lot of weight. So I think there is still that it's not desirable, but there's a different social pressure for women to stay thin than there is for men. I think only because the men are not so valued by their body as a woman is. That's the point I was making. But I agree with you. I don't think people find fat, overweight attractive. So she goes in Fat is a Feminist Issue, which is her other book. I'm just quoting it here because I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to perhaps do something on that. I don't know. We saw how for many women, the eating of large quantities of food gave them, albeit only temporarily, feelings of strength and substance, a kind of stoking up of the emotional furnace so depended upon by others. So fat, I concluded, is an individual conscious or unconscious rebellion against an imposing social role. So she says, just in the same way that anorexia is about control to a degree, as Natalie said before, that they have a controlling parent, society has these pressures on them, and they think the only thing they can take control of is their food. I can decide not to eat, and I want to be thin. And they're also rebelling against becoming a woman. So they have a period and they start seeing their breast developing, and they're like, nah, don't want this because it means I have to move into this role as a woman that they're perhaps rebelling against. And so they deny themselves of food. Whereas for other women, they eat a lot, because for a time there, it gives them a feeling of control as well, strength and substance, that I'm stoking up the emotional furnace. There's something about eating to comfort the emotions that weren't met, to dumb down the emotion. It's a way of covering up so that I don't have to conform to what society says about me.
And also keep away men. A lot of women do it to keep away men because men are repulsed. Some men are repulsed by fat women. So they do it to keep them away.
Yes. And if they're very attractive, they might do it to say, I don't want the men to come to me. Yeah. So it's a protection. It's like an armor that if I'm fat, you won't find me attractive, you won't come near me. So I don't have to have these relationships that are toxic or that you perhaps think are going to be toxic. Yeah, so Curtis says I guess that's the point, which is that we as men generally given the luxury of do not care. Yeah, so they cannot care about the weight so much. It's kind of male privilege, as Natalie says. And then Richard says, Gracie keeps stating that I'm fat, and the times we go to the play park, my new name is Blibberblog. The author of this book is quite clever. Yeah, yeah. And it's not nice at any age to be teased or mocked for the way we look. It's big pressure. And going back to that as well about what Brian said about his family, I know someone who works in a obesity clinic in another country, and they were telling me that the studies, they're a doctor, and the studies, the research they've done shows that actually some people have a fat gene. So there is a more of a genetic disposition to fat. They can eat the same food as other people, do the same exercise, and still put on more weight than others. And I think understanding the science behind that, this is a genetic factor in this as well, that we can have more empathy with others who are fat, because we can see that it's not just the mental, it might be comfort eating, it might be for whatever reason the mental side of it, but there's also a physical side of it, which some people put on weight more easily, some people lose weight more easily. So there is that factor, and I think it's becoming more and more scientifically proven that some people are just obese and it's not their fault. And I think there's a lot of blame when it comes to fat. So that's the other thing that's so painful about it. So I've shown a woman here with her mouth covered because for me, that's kind of what this slide is saying. For the compulsive eater, the experience of eating while fraught with anxiety contains elements of soothing. And so food can become an addiction in the same way that alcohol, drugs, pornography, all these things are addictions because there's a deeper emotional issue or an emotional need that's not being met. And I think it's similar to the compulsive eater on the back of all these things about what we said about women and the need to be thin, etc., the need to, and the relationship to food being complex. That compulsive eating contains elements of soothing, and the impulse towards food is generally coupled with a desire to give to oneself, to quiet an upset, to make whole what is empty, to say what cannot be spoken. So there's an unmet need there, perhaps in relationships or relationships with parents, and then relationships with a boyfriend or spouse that you haven't got. Perhaps there's a need for a relationship, a need to be loved, and a need to express your need that hasn't been met. So you fill that void with food, and that becomes a habit and a cycle, and then it needs to be addressed and broken. Yes, Natalie.
I was going to say, why do you think that one of the main things Jesus says it has to be overcome is food? Food is the thing. It's not something else. It's not, it's not like you can name many things that would, but it has to be, like if you look at Jesus, it was diet that had to I think, get through the time of trouble. Obviously, it's about love. We all know if you don't love your neighbour, but putting that aside, individually, your own addictions or your own weaknesses, if you don't mind me saying it, it's a weakness. Whether it's caused by someone else or not, it's still a weakness that we have to overcome, because our environment won't change unless we make the change. But you can have your environment change, but there'll always be something that will affect that addiction, whether it's, say, food. Say you left your husband who was abusing you and he made you fill that void with eating, or you weren't getting enough sexual or intimacy, whatever it is, you leave that environment and there'll be something else that will trigger that same addiction, whatever addiction you want to talk about. So I think that's why Jesus says that this is and was tested himself. That was the deepest root thing because it's so connected with the stomach and eating. It's so connected with our emotions and our strength. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on why God chose that for Jesus to be the great test. I'm not saying that the great test in our movement, don't get me wrong, is eating. I'm just saying that it's one of the hardest things to overcome is diet. And it shows when you do it shows full control individually for all other things in your life where you are balanced.
Yeah, I think with Jesus, it's interesting, the three temptations, because they appeal to that. I think they touch all areas of humanity. I think that's why, because the food is obviously something that affects everyone, but on a deeper level, that's about self and indulgence. And that can look like lots of things, but obviously it was food in the wilderness. And there was, and then showing them the kingdoms of the world, there's pride and there's authority and there's power and there's all those things that perhaps appeal, I don't know about more to men, but it's been cultivated to appeal more to men because they're allowed to do that. I think it's probably just as many women would be appealed to by pride and power if they were given the opportunities, but in a patriarchy, they're not so much given those opportunities. And then what's the third one? What's the third temptation? So showing all the kingdoms of the world. Oh, throw yourself off, and that presumption. So that's I guess presumption specifically to do with faith in God and how it operates. But I do want.
What does Ellen White say about food? Doesn't she say that food is the main?
Ellen White says that those who can overcome appetite can overcome every other sin.
Yeah, that's what I want to say.
But I was looking at something to do with that the other day, and I do want to put in here that she's pretty categorical as well about fasting, because I started looking at fasting. Forgot why I was doing that now. It wasn't in connection with this so much. It was more in connection with fasting and prayer, because it came up in prayer meetings. It wasn't so much about physical food fasting, but she did say to somebody there that, there is no requirement for us to fast 40 days as Moses did when he went up in the mountain, Jesus, because she actually made the parallel with Moses, but she said Jesus has done it for us, so we don't have to do that. So there is something there about that extreme denial, which I guess you could say is anorexia, that we don't have to do. That's not required. And for me, I want to move away from that picture of
Emma,
the stress.
You've got 5 minutes left for 12 o'clock.
I don't know how many slides I've got left. Can I have a bit of time extra if people don't mind? I don't know if I can finish them like this. I can see how many there are. I don't think there's that many left. Let's see if we can get through them now. So,
and just to comment on the food thing, I mean, if you go back to Eve and see why she ate the apple when she wasn't really hungry at all. So
I think with Eve, I think we have to be careful, although I know the author made reference to Eve in making that purely a physical test. We're still looking at it very literally. And I know that food is an issue, but I want for those women, especially who this is a big emotional, psychological issue, to move away from the fact that if you're not overcoming on appetite, which may equal if you're not thin, you're not going to make it. And I think that's really important to move from that psychology of the stick.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think we need to move away from the stick and say, okay, what's God actually saying about all that? And I'm not saying that food isn't an issue and we do need to overcome on one level. Obviously, indulgence, which is really a test in the West when there's so much available, and all you can eat restaurants is a nightmare. It's a nightmare for people. And I get that we're flooded with indulgence, but also indulgence on social media, lots of other things as well. So we've got access to all this information.
You might have diet addiction. You might be overeating, but not fat. It's not just about being overweight and fat. You could have a diet issue, like you're talking about anorexia, or just normal, filling the void with food, whatever it is. It's not just about your weight.
Yeah, it's a way of managing issues, and I think we can all relate to that when we've got an addiction to certain thing, or we've got a need for it beyond perhaps, or we feel it's out of control, or we can push things in those areas, extreme diets and just there's a whole range, I think, when it comes to appetite and diet, but specifically this emotional connection to it, which I think is where we need to work on. It's
Emma.
We've been done. Yeah, blessing.
Sorry, I'd had my hand up for a while. I just wanted to
didn't see it.
In this part before you move on, and that is, I don't think diet is a test, and I don't think it's ever been a test. I think it's really problematic to speak about the diet question within the context of test. So what had happened with Eve and Adam, that wasn't about food. It was about the kingdom. God just used that as a simple voting mechanism to determine which kingdom they wanted to be part of. And there was nothing in the fruit itself. There was no point, nothing. It was really about the ideas they had in their minds. You know, did they think God was fair or not? Did they like the idea of God that they had? And it was the same with Jesus. Jesus was being tested on his messiahship. Did Jesus really believe that um, he was who the scriptures said he was? Because when he came as a baby, he didn't know that. He had to grow into it. You know, he had to learn as we learn as human beings, to the point where he could be tested. And he was being tested on his messiahship. But Lucifer said, if you are the Son of God. And Ellen White actually explains the issue there was whether Jesus was going to go their own way, you know, go his own way, or wait for God's time to bring relief. And what Ellen White says, we could talk about it, we could analyze it, and if need be, we could disagree. But I think it's really problematic to say diet is a test, because it's never been a test. God's kingdom is not staked on something that is a natural human desire. We were built to love food. And I think, like you said, a lot of women end up feeling bad because of this issue. You know, like it's a very damaging issue. God designed us to have desire, to have appetite, to actually love nice food and stuff like that. And the fight that Lucifer and God are having is way bigger than what we eat. It just cannot be the test. Never has been, never will be.
Amen. Yeah, and that's relief, I think, to a lot of people. So I'm sure it would be a relief to a lot of people. I think that's, yeah, it's a really important point. I'm only on slide 11 and I've got 20, I've just realised. So I think it's probably best to make a part 2, really, because I don't think we're going to do it justice if I race through the slides, because I think for me, the important point about it is not so much what she's saying, it's us to get our experience out of it and to see if we've got any of our own experience that we can relate to it. I know some people haven't spoken, especially the women that haven't spoken. I know Charity's only listening in, so she can't, perhaps. And Melania might be too. Nyasha and Shami or Susan, do you have anything you want to comment?
Growing up, I heard Brian mention about it's hereditary in terms of the being overweight or big in body. I'm from a family of big bones, we call it.
Yeah.
I never really understand what that means, big
I used
bones.
to get that as well. Yeah, big bones.
And I love food. When I say love food, I really love food,
Yeah.
and food has to taste good. So there was this man that was in the church because my mother she's always had a weight problem. And he said to me that you're going to be fat like your mother. And the way he emphasized, be fat like your mother. I didn't want that. And I remember always having like um, a certain weight that I would never exceed. And if I got near it, then I'd either diet or I'd exercise a lot. And the good thing is that I exercise, it's my lifestyle. So that's something I've always done. So loving food and knowing that I'm exercising balances the weight. So I've never exceeded that weight that I had actually set for myself. That was a bar that I set for myself. And to this day, I still haven't gone over that weight. And it doesn't bother me now if I put on weight, because I know that as long as I feel good in myself, I'm happy with that. I don't, and I've never been into the makeup and all this cosmetic stuff to have that image as a woman, kind of. So I just love food and I eat food and I'm happy with how I look.
Great, I can relate to that. I think our family loves food as well. I think it's important what you said about yeah, that way that you won't go over a certain weight and that you check it and you exercise to balance it, and there's that constant kind of scale in your head in a way, or not constant perhaps, but there is a in your head there's a like, I can't go over that because I've got to come back to it. And I think I can definitely relate to that, and I'm sure I don't know if men approach that in the same way as women. And I'm not saying all women like with everything, but it's that whole consciousness that I'm going to get on a scale and I'm dictated to by how that says, regardless of how I feel. If that's going up, I am just not happy. And now you're saying, now you're not so bothered about it. I think that's one thing that comes with age, is there is perhaps less pressure, perhaps we're at a different stage. We're not trying to attract a mate necessarily. I'm not saying it was only for that before, but there is that pressure to have a relationship, and if you haven't got one, or you're getting older and you're perhaps happy in yourself more. I think it's more that I think you get more mature and more settled in yourself and who you are, perhaps, hopefully, and that gives you more confidence to say, you know, I don't really care what people think so much as I used to, even though we all do care on a level, what people think.
But even like how we get old and we say we have age problems with joints and skin and all those kind of things. That's something I don't fall into either, because I have to feel good in myself. I have to feel confident in my feet, on my feet, I should say. It's, for instance, last January, you know, in that period, I couldn't squat. I had knee problems and all these joint issues, and you hear in the media or wherever that you're getting old. It's because you're getting old.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily the case, because I always challenge myself physically, and I've actually started an exercise regime that's a strengthened ankles, feet, knees, and I can squat now and stay low for a long period of time. I don't have knee problems anymore because I'm doing this for myself. Because yes, I am getting old. I am getting old, and I'm getting old gracefully, and I'm happy to be the age I am, because a lot of my peers haven't made it. So these problems that society says happens when you're old, you can fight against it if that's what you want. There is a movement is medicine, and food is medicine. So I just combine the two of them, and I think I'm at my best I've ever felt in a long while.
That's
God be the
really
glory.
good. And it's really encouraging that you can be, as we get older. We don't have to get old in that sense. We don't have to buy into all the, again, media about you can't move at your age.
Yeah, I've got a friend, Emma, who her name's Manjit,
Oh,
and she
Debbie, sorry, they've
yeah.
got hands up. Do you want to?
Oh, beg your
Charity's had a
pardon.
hand up for a while. Yeah,
Beg your
can you
pardon.
hold that thought?
Okay.
Just Charity, go on. And then Brian, I think.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just thinking also about my experience with food, and I can relate a lot with Susan because I love food as well. I've always loved food. But the thing is, when I think from a young age until my late 20s, I've never had an issue with my body, really. I'm not sure why, but I've never had issues where I'm always afraid of getting fat or anything. And I've never I have fluctuated on weight, but I've really mainly always stayed in the 50s and maybe 60. And then when I don't know if it coincides with the time that I got married, or I don't know if that came with the marriage, or there's something that changed about me. I started gaining weight a bit, and then eventually I started having other issues really. At some point I was gluten intolerant for some time, and then I was banana intolerant for some time. And then I started realizing that I had an issue with carbohydrates. And so that started affecting me in terms of how much I gain weight. And I would I would not lose it as much as I used to. I never used to put in effort in really trying to lose weight or maintaining weight. But over time, as I've grown, got into my 30s, wow, it's I've noticed how much I have started being so conscious about how I look and my weight, because I keep saying this to myself that I've never been this weight in my life ever. Because I've never gone like above 60. So when I went above 60, I started getting worried. But at the same time, I was also developing other issues, you know, with how my body is processing food. But I've noticed I've started having a lot of issues with my body image and how I look, and I've become more conscious about what I eat. And it has gotten so bad that it would stress me out a lot. And I think Blessing knows, I don't know how many times I would ask him about how I look and, you know, just talk about it. And generally, when I get anxious about something, it really eats me up. So it's so bad that I got to a point where I felt like I was so fat. And I realized, okay, I have a problem. I'm actually developing an issue, a problem with how I see myself or how I think about myself. And I have been trying to look at things differently, you know, to just try and worry more about my health as opposed to my weight. But it has not been easy. So for me personally, I don't know if I can trace it back. I don't know. Maybe it might be connected with something emotional or not. I don't know. But it, I guess it's something that I felt I should share as well, since you're asking about the experiences that people had, especially women. And I've noticed that even when I look at, like, I tend to compare myself with other women. And I try by all means to not do that, but I see myself doing that. And, you know, you want to have a flat stomach, you feel your stomach is too big, I have too many, you know, things hanging and all of that. And yeah, it has been a struggle. And I've noticed social media and seeing people's pictures and videos doesn't make it any better. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, it's a real struggle. And I'm hoping that I can overcome it in a, you know, in a healthy way.
Yeah, I think one thing is to limit our looking at social media. Anyway, that's another thing, the influence of social media. But I appreciate what you're saying about the whole, as you hit your 30s, well, things change in your body as well. And that's another thing with women. Obviously, men have hormones too, but there's so much more study now on the hormones of women and how it changes during the monthly cycle, how it changes when you hit perimenopause, before the menopause, during the menopause, after the menopause, and how it's much harder to shift weight around the middle, specifically in menopause. So that's a huge thing, that stomach fat is much harder to shift. The whole metabolism changes of carbohydrates, so you can eat the same thing. That's another study in itself. I did a whole program on menopause, but I think it's really important to understand those fluctuations, because those affect everything. Hormones affect every body system. So it's digestive, it's muscle growth, it's bone density, it's your brain health, it's everything, appetite, your ability to think cognitively. The whole thing is, it's all hormones. They're not just sex hormones, estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone, and they're affected by the thyroid, insulin. There's so many connections there which are quite intimate. And it's understanding that. So at different times of the month, women's moods can go right up and down, their appetite can go right up and down, their ability to store fat, release fat. It's just complicated. And I think we need empathy again for that. But yeah, that whole anxiety around the fat, I think is crucial. And that relationship, and many women are very anxious over the fat, over what they look like. And it just, and yeah, it's a real trap. It can be a real stress. And Brian, you had your hand up.
Yes, in fact, just now that you were addressing what was just said, I was going to say exactly the same thing, that, look, it's way too complicated as to what you just put in your mouth.
Absolutely.
Our bodies react to so many different things at different times. So I would encourage, my goodness, my memory is terrible.
Charity.
I don't know if I'm getting Alzheimer's now.
And I think we all say that every age, to be honest, Brian. Like, I've forgotten. You mean Charity, the one that just spoke?
Charity, yes.
Yeah.
Charity, don't be too depressed about it. Seriously. There is so much going on that is beyond you. And if you get overstressed over this, you add to the problem rather than solve it. So, just keep to what you're doing. And as Emma said, don't pay attention too much as well to social media. That's just adding another stress onto it. But yeah, I was going to say, I like what Blessing said earlier on about diet and our bodies were made to eat good food and stuff like that. Because I remember when we first joined the movement, wow, we had a crazy time right at the beginning where we thought eating raw food is the best for the body. I had never ever got involved, not because I didn't believe it, but because I couldn't do it. And I love food. So, yeah, there was no ways I was going to go down that route. But many people started doing that. And we truly believed in a raw diet completely. And quite a lot of people got sick that I know of.
Yeah.
Got very sick. And it just proved that you can't start changing things overnight. Your body is such a complex
Machine.
yeah, it's impossible, honestly, to just think that we can click your fingers and things are going to change. And social media, at my age group, social media knows my age. So I see the adverts come up for my age group.
Yeah. Saga, holidays.
All the things that I have issue with, those things keep coming up in the adverts. And yes, and they got solutions. Everybody's got a solution to your problem. So I tend not to pay attention to all that stuff and say, hey, if I took all the medication these people are pushing at me, I'd die.
You'd only be eating pills. That's what you
Absolutely. So yeah, Charity, don't overstress. I think Emma answered that perfectly for you. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's really important. I think for me in recent weeks, because I have to say, I think this book really triggered me, and certain portions of it we haven't actually got to the bits. I think that the bits that were kind of the solution as well, and the bits that triggering a bit more. Well, some of it we have, and I think it's really important acceptance. I think we said this in prayer meeting too about accepting. Just accept. This is who you are. This is what it is. This is the body that God's given you. This is these are the challenges that we face with every stage of life. There are different challenges. Every to use charity as an example, you've had a massive shift in environment, diet, work situation, friendship dynamics. That's a huge upheaval, and all that affects the body and the mind. And the most important thing is not to get anxious about any of it. And I think that's the stress, that's the challenge, is not to be anxious and to accept this is what it is. That's okay. It's all okay. And relax about it, because so often I think we have anxiety and guilt and tension over our situation, and that does not drive us to make the changes, and it doesn't help us to cope on a daily basis. So this is where counselling comes in, and psychological support, I think, and recognizing the love of God behind all that. So I know there was a little bit more discussion about, I'll finish here, and I think we'll have to do a part 2 or a Vespers or something to finish the rest of it. Also, Debbie wanted to speak. Is that what you've written in the chat, Debbie?
Yes, I was going to say, you know, we've been talking about food, but sometimes we need to understand and educate ourselves about rightful eating.
Yeah.
And it's not just about eating food, it's eating the right foods that are going to be nourishing for our bodies. And my friend had this issue way back when, and I knew she had the thing about you know, not eating about her figure. She was always saying she wanted to be slim, she wants to get into jeans, and she wasn't eating properly, and she was always eating chocolates, and that was it. She wasn't really eating foods that would nourish her body. And I kept on to him, and you can only tell people, you can't force them to do anything. And over time, I used to keep saying to her, have you had this? Do you do this? Have you tried this? You know, I said, you know, you've got to be very careful. You know, I was trying to help her and guide her in how I was trying to live my life and what I've learned. And I was passing that information on to her. But obviously, you know, over time, what's happened now, she's only 45. And she said to me that she kept having all these pains in her back, and she thought she's got MS. And I thought, what made you think you got MS? You know, I said, what you need to do is go to a doctor and let him evaluate, you know, and give you the right diagnosis. Try and find out. So she said, I will. So she went to go and find out, and she only told me this like Wednesday or Thursday. She said, oh, Debbie, I found out what it was after all these tests. I said, what did they say? She said, I've got arthritis. I said, what? And so she's got it in her spine, you know, near the end of it, and she's got it in her neck, and she's 45. And I said, well, the trouble with us today, in the world today, is that we ignore things, you know, we just go ahead and eat the things that we like and they taste nice, not knowing what they really are doing to our bodies. It's because we buy on experience and because they taste nice. We don't educate our minds to say, right, I'll eat this because it's going to be good for my blood. I'll eat nuts because they're going to be good for my brain. You know, we don't educate. We base it all on taste. And so that's how she's been living her life. And so I said to her, right, what are you going to do now? I said, oh, that's what I said to her. I said, it's a shame that we don't educate ourselves to make sure that we don't come to that point where we don't have these diseases. It's not until we have those diseases that's the time that we tend to want to change, or we have to, because we're forced into changing the way that we diet, our mindset. That's the time that we do it. We don't do it before that time. And this is the conversation I was having with her.
It's recognizing, I think, that that's really challenging for people, because everybody has, you see, you know, a tendency to well, we're meant to enjoy the food, so taste is going to drive us, which is good, but on one level. But it's that there's probably it's much more complicated than just the taste for her. But even then, obviously, we can just go with what we taste like that, and it's not good for us. But at the same time, we can educate taste buds to change, and then we like the food that's for us that we taste, and it tastes good. So I think there's also recognizing in her situation that temperance or discipline for most people is quite difficult, so that we're not very disciplined, and if it hurts, we're not going to do it. If it, you know, if we're doing exercise and it's hurting me, I'm going to stop. And yet sometimes we have to push beyond that comfort zone to change. It takes a lot of work to change anything, and a lot of people in the world, we don't have that discipline. And even as Christians, it's hard to get that discipline. We're supposed to be disciples or disciplined with Christ. There is that understanding that people are very limited in their, you know, capacity to do that, or have lost that ability to do it, and they've been driven by different circumstances the way they are. So I think again, it's having empathy to her that she's got those
Yeah,
issues.
I was going to say that.
Information is important. So you eat what you think is right, what people tell you, and then you've been told the wrong thing, or you do the wrong thing, and it's not. You know, there's so much information out there. We're flooded with scientific information that will prove this and the opposite in many ways. So they might say, this is good for you, you have to have that. And then someone else might say, no, actually too much of that is not. So there's a lot that you've got to wade through, obviously. But I appreciate you that, yeah, that part of it is education and information about what to eat.
I was going to say, because that's the second time I've heard somebody had something wrong because of their eating. There's somebody I worked before, just before I came here. She was very big. She had a big stomach. She looked almost like 6 months pregnant. And basically, she wasn't exercising. She was just sitting down, eating. And she came to the workplace, looked really, really bad. And she thought it was something wrong with her eyes. So she went and had an eye examination, and then went to the doctors, and they told her she had diabetes.
Oh, these are real
Yeah.
lifestyle diseases that people get because of the food that's available to us now as well. A lot of it's not good for us. When you had to live off the land, you didn't have these issues because often the issue was deprivation, not too much of it. So you had to eat what was grown, and if there wasn't any, you're going hungry. So I guess that's a slightly different point from this, I guess, emotional attachment to it. I just wanted to go back to finish on the point about the test that Natalie clarified in the chat, that she wasn't saying it was a test, but that obviously she was referring to the test of Jesus in the wilderness and why that was appetite. And Blessing responds to that. I hear you, Natalie. What I'm saying is that it's not helpful or accurate to speak of diet in the context of testing. So either we don't understand Ellen White well, or we will have to analyze what she said and determine if we agree with her on that point about appetite being a test. So I think that was an important point to raise. And Richard's quoted 2 Peter 2.
Can you quote my replies, please?
Oh, sorry, I don't know if that was a kind of like a needs to be written. Let me just see. Just gone back too far. Whoops. Do you want to just summarize it, Natalie? Where was it?
No, you can just read the replies after they were written. Thank you.
Okay. Blessing, I never said it's a test, and I will voice what I feel is needed to be said, whether people agree or not. Smiley face. That's fair. But my point, Blessing says that's fair, but my point was about your question on Ellen White saying it was a test, not you. Natalie says, I think I will take the good advice from the prophet, not members, and will continue to quote her and ask what do we think she meant. And Blessing says, and we will continue to discuss your questions. Absolutely. So, and then Richard said 2 Peter 2:2-4, which says, do you want to read it, Richard? Have you got it there?
That was just regarding Brian's comment with the algorithms of the adverts and things like that.
Okay. And many shall follow their pernicious ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. And through covetousness shall they with feigned words make merchandise of you, whose judgment now for a long time lingereth not, and their damnation slumbereth not. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved into judgment. So I suppose that there's negative influences being thrown at us that we have to factor in as well, and limit the damage of those. I suppose, like we said to Charity, perhaps limit the social media. And algorithms is an issue. So Charity put the other problem is algorithms. I don't know how many times I've seen adverts of women working out, apps for working out, and you're not even Googling about food and exercise. Yeah, it's targeted at your age group, but who you are as well. And Natalie, I don't know what Natalie was saying that to. Our men been pricing 25 years, no UPFs, and if you can afford to, go organic. Yeah. What is a UPF? Ultra processed food. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I think, yeah, so we'll finish it there. Thank you very much for your contributions, everyone. It's been a blessing, and I hope we can help each other and strengthen each other and have more empathy for all those around us. I suppose that's always the goal, the aim, and understand more about the dynamics of our relationship with God. So with that said, we'll have to do a part 2. Let's close in prayer. Our dear loving God, we thank you for the information that we have available to us at this time in Earth's history, how you have guided and led us in the movement to understand equality and to understand the depths of this subject, and how it affects each one of us in our societies, our cultures which we live, and not only as an individual in our society, but also in our family situation, in our own personal lives, of the experiences that we've gone through, the neglect and the damage that many of us have suffered to different degrees, and to now try to understand the way we behave, why we do what we do, and how our emotions and our bodies and our physical structures, how it all affects how we feel and how we think, and this development of character that we have been focused on as a movement. Thank you that we can understand ourselves better. Thank you that we can understand you better and how to relate to you. Please continue to help each one of us and strengthen us on this journey. We ask now in Jesus' name. Amen.